The history of weaponry is often defined by the fierce contest between military-industrial complexes, yet sometimes, a single individual, driven by practical experience rather than academic pedigree, can unilaterally redefine the terms of engagement. The story of the Soviet RGD-33 hand grenade, and its shattering impact on the battlefield confidence of the German Wehrmacht, begins not in a massive state-funded laboratory, but with one such man, Mikhail Dyakonov. Born into a burgher, petty bourgeoisie, family in Tula in 1881, Dyakonov's life journey, from a simple man of the Russian Empire's Tula land to a staff captain and, finally, to a pioneering self-taught designer of revolutionary grenade weaponry, is a testament to the power of field-tested ingenuity. His eventual creation, the RGD-33, was the unassuming surprise that would, a quarter of a century later, force Germany's finest military engineers to reconsider the very concept of the infantry hand grenade. The earliest seeds of this future conflict were sown under the atmospheric pall of Petrograd in 1915, during the thick, historic mists of the Great War. It is here that we find the young staff captain Mikhail Dyakonov, far from the Tula armaments factories that shaped his birth city, hunched over meticulous blueprints within the workshops of the prestigious Oranienbaum Rifle School. His hands, though primarily trained for the rifle and the rigors of frontline command, were now delicately manipulating a pair of calipers, the tools of an emerging craftsman rather than a career officer. In that moment, the army officer was fundamentally transforming himself into a constructor designer, perhaps without any full realization that the seemingly modest weapon he was sketching would one day become a key element in baffling the most technologically advanced military engineers the German nation could offer. This transformation, from soldier to self-taught designer, was the crucible from which Soviet grenade innovation was forged, prioritizing battlefield efficacy and simplicity over complex theoretical design. Mikhail Dyakonov's inventive career was a remarkable case of a late-blooming, battle-hardened genius. Intriguingly, his path as an inventor did not commence in his youth or early career, but only began in earnest when he was already 38 years old, fully immersed and actively serving as a frontline officer. This crucial detail explains the profoundly practical and soldier-centric nature of his designs. His experience at the front provided him with an intimate, unromanticized understanding of what was truly required in the heat of combat, informing his designs with a pragmatism that often eluded traditional, laboratory-bound engineers. This background enabled him to consistently devise instruments of war that were not merely innovative but fundamentally effective and directly addressed tactical shortcomings. His initial, and pivotal, foray into military invention occurred just prior to the seismic political shifts of the Russian Revolution. Dyakonov's very first major invention, a complete grenade launcher complex specifically designed to be used with the venerable Mosin rifle, was officially adopted for military service only one short year before the 1917 revolution fundamentally reshaped the landscape of his nation. This adoption, coming so close to a complete historical upheaval, underscores the recognized immediate utility and groundbreaking potential of his early work. It cemented his reputation within the military structure as a man capable of revolutionary contributions in the often overlooked, yet tactically critical, field of grenade weaponry. He was a man capable of bridging the gap between infantry needs and armament design, a trait that would define the RGD-33. The tragic end of Dyakonov's life in 1941, during the brutal and punishing siege of Leningrad, merely punctuated a lifetime of dedicated and relentless innovation. Even as the city suffered under the devastating German blockade, his work continued, a final, defiant flourish of engineering brilliance. Before his untimely death, Dyakonov succeeded in creating yet another crucial piece of ordnance: the formidable RPG-41 anti-tank grenade. This heavy-hitting weapon, designed to combat the armored threat looming outside the city walls, was an immediate success, and was affectionately, or perhaps fearfully, nicknamed the Voroshilov kilogram by the Soviet soldiers who wielded it. The development of the RPG-41 right up until his death illustrates his enduring commitment to the Red Army's technological superiority and his constant drive to provide frontline troops with the necessary tools to achieve victory. Dyakonov's life was thus a complete, unbroken trajectory, from an officer recognizing a lack in 1915 to a designer filling critical defensive gaps in 1941. The legacy of Mikhail Dyakonov, and particularly the development of the RGD-33 in 1933, cannot be overstated. It represents the successful convergence of an army officer's practical knowledge and a self-taught inventor's ingenuity. It was a product born from the realities of the trenches, not from an abstract design brief. The resulting weapon was poised to enter service just as the German Wehrmacht was growing confident in its own primary hand grenade, the Stielhandgranate M24, or potato masher. What German engineers and soldiers initially perceived as a definitive, superior design was soon to be challenged by the sophisticated, dual-mode effectiveness of Dyakonov's creation. The RGD-33, the crowning achievement of the self-taught genius from Tula, was the unforeseen element, the Russian mystery, that would ultimately shatter the German perception of their own technical supremacy in the field of infantry grenades and fundamentally alter the tactical dynamics of the Eastern Front, a technological turning point conceived in a 1915 workshop by a staff captain with a set of calipers. Before the shocking revelation of the Soviet RGD-33, the German Wehrmacht marched into the Soviet Union with an unshakable confidence in its standard-issue infantry weapon, the Stielhandgranate M24. Known colloquially and universally as the Kolatushka, potato masher, by its adversaries and its users alike, this grenade was more than just a piece of ordnance, it was a symbol of German military engineering, pragmatic, reliable, and, in the minds of the soldiers who wielded it, unequivocally superior. This deeply ingrained belief in the M24's perfection was not unfounded, it was based on a design philosophy that prioritized safety, throwing distance, and tactical versatility, creating a formidable weapon that had proven itself in the campaigns across Western Europe. For the German soldier of 1941, the Stielhandgranate was the definitive tool for clearing trenches, silencing machine gun nests, and breaking enemy resolve. The technical characteristics of the M24 were a testament to this design philosophy. The grenade was a substantial piece of equipment, weighing a total of 750 grams. Its warhead, a thin-walled steel canister, contained a charge of 170 to 180 grams of amytal, an explosive chosen for its stability and potent concussive effect. One of its most defining features was its deliberately long delay fuse of 4.5 to 7 seconds, which was activated by a simple and reliable friction-based mechanism. The activation process was straightforward. The soldier would unscrew the protective cap at the base of the wooden handle, revealing a pull cord with a small porcelain ball attached to the end. A firm tug on this cord would drag a roughened steel rod through the friction igniter chemical composition, initiating the time delay fuse. This simple, mechanical action was easy to perform even with gloves in cold weather, a hallmark of German design that prioritized functionality in all conditions. The primary advantage of the Stielhandgranate, and the source of much of the German confidence, was its long wooden handle. This feature was not merely for aesthetics or ease of carrying, it was a functional lever. The handle allowed an average soldier to throw the grenade significantly farther than the more common spherical or pineapple style grenades used by other armies, achieving distances of up to 50 meters. This extended range provided a critical tactical advantage, allowing German infantry to engage targets from a safer distance and to effectively suppress enemy positions before an assault. Furthermore, the M24 was remarkably versatile. The warhead could be detached from the handle and used as a smaller, concealable charge. For demolition tasks or against fortifications, multiple warheads could be bundled together around a central grenade, creating a powerful, Gewalt-Ladung, concentrated charge. This adaptability meant the M24 was not just an anti-personnel weapon but a multi-purpose infantry tool. This technical and tactical prowess fostered a profound psychological belief among German troops in the M24's supremacy. Soldiers considered their potato masher to be the ideal weapon due to its unwavering simplicity and, most importantly, its reliability and safety. The design of the friction igniter meant that accidental detonation was nearly impossible. This belief in its safety was so profound that it was enshrined in their training and instructions, which famously stated, "Even if a soldier is hit by a bullet during the throwing motion, the grenade will not detonate, as the fuse is only initiated by the deliberate act of pulling the cord." This feature provided immense peace of mind in the chaos of combat, allowing soldiers to carry the grenade with confidence, knowing it would only become live at the exact moment of their choosing. This sense of control and predictability cemented the Stielhandgranate M24's reputation not just as a weapon, but as a trusted companion on the battlefield. This unwavering faith in their potato masher created a psychological and tactical baseline, a sense of established superiority that was about to be violently and irrevocably shattered. The German soldier believed he held the perfect grenade, unaware that an entirely different philosophy of explosive warfare was waiting for him on the vast plains of the East. The year 1933 marked a silent but profound shift in the evolution of infantry weaponry, a development that would remain largely unappreciated by the wider world until it was unleashed in the crucible of war 8 years later. This turning point did not take place in a grand assembly hall or a bustling factory, but on a windswept military testing range near Leningrad. An artistic depiction of the event would show a group of Red Army Commission officers standing at a cautious distance. A sharp, cracking explosion echoes across the field, a sound familiar to all present. But as the smoke begins to clear, the routine observation gives way to stunned silence. The officers move forward, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief as they examine the results. Metal targets, placed at ranges that were considered well within the margin of safety for a standard grenade blast, have been utterly shredded, riddled with a dense pattern of high-velocity shrapnel. It was in this moment that Dyakonov's new grenade, the RGD-33, announced its revolutionary potential, surprise, born of ingenious design. Formally adopted in 1933, the Ruchna Granata Dyakonova Obrazca 1933 Goda, Dyakonov hand grenade, 1933 model, or RGD-33, was a testament to its creator's practical, combat-focused design philosophy. On the surface, its specifications seemed competitive but not necessarily revolutionary. The grenade's body weighed between 495 and 600 grams, making it lighter and more compact than its German counterpart, the Stielhandgranate M24. It was packed with a potent 140-gram charge of TNT, a more powerful explosive compound than the Amatol used in the German potato masher. Its fuse provided a delay of 3.5 to 4 seconds, a noticeably shorter and more aggressive timing that gave the enemy less opportunity to react or take cover. However, the true genius of the RGD-33 was not found in these basic statistics, but in a single, transformative feature: removable, pre-scored metal fragmentation sleeve. This component, known as the rubashka, shirt or jacket, was the heart of the grenade's dual-mode capability. It was a thick, steel cylinder that slipped over the main body of the grenade. Without this sleeve, the RGD-33 functioned as an offensive grenade. Its relatively light body would produce a limited number of fragments, creating a powerful concussion effect primarily intended to stun and disorient the enemy in enclosed spaces or during an assault, allowing the attacking soldier to throw it and immediately advance without significant risk from his own shrapnel. But when the soldier fitted the heavy rubashka over the grenade's body, its tactical function was instantly and radically transformed. It became a defensive grenade of terrifying power. The sleeve, with its deep, diamond-shaped scoring, was designed to shatter into a multitude of uniform, lethal fragments upon detonation, creating a dense, inescapable, metal rain that vastly increased its casualty-producing radius. This simple addition gave the individual soldier an unprecedented level of tactical choice on the battlefield. Delving deeper into its design reveals further layers of sophistication. A little-known fact is that the RGD-33 was the world's very first mass-produced hand grenade to incorporate this dual-mode offensive/defensive capability into a single, unified design. This was not an afterthought or a field modification, it was an integral part of its conception. Furthermore, the grenade's lethal fragmentation effect was not solely dependent on the external sleeve. Internally, the explosive charge was wrapped in a thin steel ribbon, which itself was coiled into 3 or 4 layers and featured square pre-scoring. This meant that even in its offensive mode, the RGD-33 was engineered to produce a more consistent and effective fragmentation pattern than many other grenades of its era. The rubashka was an amplifier, turning a competent weapon into an exceptionally deadly one. Another unique aspect of the RGD-33 lay in its logistics and handling. To conserve space during transport and shipping, the grenades were supplied to the troops in a disassembled state. The bodies, handles, and detonator assemblies were all packed separately. This meant that, unlike the simple pull-and-throw nature of the German M24, the Soviet soldier had to assemble the RGD-33 before use, a process that required a greater degree of training and familiarity with the weapon's mechanics. While this complexity would eventually lead to its replacement by simpler models, it underscored the sophisticated and multi-component nature of the design. The surprise, born on the Leningrad testing grounds, was not a simple bludgeon, but a complex and versatile instrument of war, waiting for its moment to prove that adaptability and clever engineering could be just as decisive as brute force. The summer of 1941 saw the German Wehrmacht surge across the Soviet border, a military machine fueled by a potent combination of tactical brilliance, combat experience, and an unshakable belief in its own technological supremacy. The initial period of the Great Patriotic War was, for the Germans, a series of stunning victories. Their equipment, from the panzer divisions to the Stuka dive bombers, seemed to confirm their inherent superiority. For the common infantryman, this confidence was embodied in his trusted Stielhandgranate M24. He knew its weight, its delay, and its predictable, powerful blast. But as the German advance pushed deeper into Soviet territory, these soldiers began to encounter tactical surprises that chipped away at their certainty. Among the most visceral and terrifying of these was their first contact with the RGD-33 hand grenade. The first encounters were marked by confusion and a brutal re-evaluation of risk on the battlefield. German units, accustomed to the concussive force of their own potato mashers, were suddenly subjected to an entirely different kind of explosive threat. When a Soviet position threw back a volley of grenades, the ensuing detonations were not the familiar dull thumps followed by a handful of large, incidental fragments. Instead, the air would erupt with a sharp, high-pitched crack, followed instantly by a dense, whistling storm of shrapnel that seemed to saturate a wide area. German memoirs and after-action reports from this period reflect a sense of bewilderment. Soldiers who had dived for cover at what they considered a safe distance from a grenade blast were being wounded or killed by a hail of small, high-velocity projectiles. The RGD-33 was behaving in a way that defied their combat experience. The source of this shock was a fundamental difference in design philosophy, revealed in the deadly effect of Dyakonov's Rubashka. German soldiers were profoundly surprised by the sheer number of fragments produced by the RGD-33 when its defensive jacket was attached. Their own Stielhandgranate M24 was primarily a concussion weapon. Its destructive power came from the explosive blast, with fragmentation being a secondary, almost incidental effect generated by the shattering of its thin metal warhead casing. The RGD-33, in stark contrast, was a purpose-built fragmentation device. When fitted with its heavy, pre-scored sleeve, it was designed to transform the full force of its TNT charge into a controlled explosion of metal shards. The result was what the Germans could only describe as a veritable metal rain, a dense, lethal pattern of shrapnel that made a mockery of previously held notions of cover and safety. This specific technological shock was part of a broader, more unsettling discovery for the German military. They were not fighting the technologically backward, tactically inept army they had been led to expect. The effectiveness of the RGD-33 was symptomatic of a larger, unexpected Soviet resilience and ingenuity. This general astonishment is perfectly captured in the recollections of German officers from the front. In one such account, a battalion commander, Major Neuhoff, admitted in a voice breaking with emotion, "I did not expect anything like this. It's pure suicide to attack a battalion's forces with a group of 5 fighters." While this particular quote does not directly reference grenades, it powerfully reflects the pervasive sense of German disbelief at Soviet military tactics and the sheer tenacity of the Red Army soldier. The RGD-33 was a key piece of this shocking new reality. It was a tangible, lethal manifestation of the enemy's unexpected capabilities, proving that Soviet designers could create weapons that were not just different, but in certain crucial aspects, frighteningly superior. The first encounters of 1941 were therefore more than just a tactical problem, they were a psychological blow, planting the first seeds of doubt that this war in the East would be unlike any they had fought before. The profound shock experienced by German troops in the initial stages of the war was not merely a result of tactical surprise, but was rooted in the specific, superior anatomical design of the RGD-33. To understand why this weapon proved so devastating, one must conduct a detailed analysis of its defining constructive feature, the removable fragmentation sleeve. The core of the grenade's technical superiority lay in the ingenious, yet efficiently simple, principle of this heavy metal case, known to the Soviet soldiers as the Rubashka, or shirt. This component was a masterpiece of pragmatic engineering. The sleeve itself was a substantial piece of metal, weighing between 125 and 250 grams. Its surface was not smooth but was covered in a precise pattern of heavy notches. These pre-cut scorings were the key to its lethality. Upon detonation of the 140 grams of TNT within the main body, the expanding gases would force the heavy external sleeve to shatter along these predetermined lines. Instead of tearing into random, uneven shapes, the shirt transformed into a dense cloud of uniform, heavy, diamond-shaped projectiles, maximizing the probability of incapacitating enemy personnel. The primary tactical advantage provided by this anatomy was the ability to drastically alter the grenade's effective range and purpose. Without the sleeve, the RGD-33 functioned as an offensive grenade, relying more on concussive blast than shrapnel, with a lethal radius of approximately 15 meters. This allowed a soldier to throw it while advancing without an almost certain risk of being hit by his own weapon. However, the simple act of attaching the shirt fundamentally changed the physics of the explosion. With the sleeve in place, the RGD-33 became a defensive grenade of terrifying power. The heavy, pre-scored metal doubled the effective fragmentation radius to a deadly 30 meters, creating a zone of almost certain casualty that far outstripped the capabilities of the standard German Stielhandgranate. Furthermore, little-known technical data regarding the ballistic performance of the RGD-33 reveals that the danger zone extended far beyond the primary lethal radius. Due to the mass of the fragments generated by the heavy shirt and the force of the TNT charge, individual pieces of shrapnel retained lethal kinetic energy over vast distances. While the dense kill zone was 30 meters, separate fragments could fly up to a staggering distance of 100 meters. This meant that German soldiers, believing themselves to be well outside the range of a hand grenade, were frequently struck down by this far-reaching metal rain. The tactical flexibility of the RGD-33 was ensured by the mechanical design of the sleeve's attachment system. The shirt was fastened to the grenade body using a special latch and a securing pin. This robust yet simple mechanism allowed a soldier, even in the heat and chaos of combat, to quickly change the mode of the grenade. He could adapt instantly to the changing tactical situation, converting his weapon from an assault tool to a defensive powerhouse in a matter of seconds. The undeniable effectiveness of this design philosophy eventually forced a recognition of technical inferiority upon the German military-industrial complex. Confronted with the devastating reality of the RGD-33's fragmentation capabilities, German engineers later attempted to copy the principle of the removable fragmentation case to enhance their own grenades. This belated attempt at imitation served as the ultimate validation of Mikhail Dyakonov's design, proving that the anatomy of the Soviet shirt represented a clear technical superiority on the battlefield. The impact of the RGD-33 transcended the physical devastation it wrought on the battlefield. Its most profound effect was the systematic dismantling of the German soldiers' psychological armor. The Wehrmacht's initial confidence, built on a foundation of proven technology and rapid victories, began to crack and erode under the stress of a weapon that was not merely powerful, but terrifyingly unpredictable. The RGD-33 was more than just an explosive device, it was an instrument of psychological warfare that introduced a crippling element of uncertainty into every infantry engagement. The core of this psychological assault was the grenade's dual-mode capability. For a German soldier, his own Stielhandgranate M24 was a known quantity. He understood its delay, its blast radius, and its limitations. It was a predictable tool. The RGD-33, however, was a lethal enigma. The critical uncertainty over its mode of action, offensive or defensive, created a constant and draining source of additional stress. A German infantryman hunkering down in his foxhole could no longer rely on his training and experience to calculate a safe distance. The hissing fuse of an incoming Soviet grenade became the prelude to a terrifying gamble. Was this a concussive blast he could likely survive by staying low, or was it a fragmentation storm that would saturate his position with a hail of lethal steel, rendering his cover wholly inadequate? This inability to pre-calculate risk turned every encounter into a high-stakes lottery of survival. This pervasive uncertainty is vividly captured in the imagined but representative experience of a German corporal, Hans, pressed against the dirt wall of a trench. Somewhere in the chaos, he hears the distinct hiss of a Soviet grenade fuse. But where is it? How many are there? One, or a terrifying bundle of them? And the most crucial, unanswerable question, is it armed with its shirt or without? In that moment, the seconds stretch into an eternity of dread. The once unshakable confidence in the superiority of his own trusted potato masher melts away, replaced by the visceral fear of the unknown. This was a fear that compounded with every battle, a creeping dread that Soviet ingenuity had produced a weapon that played by rules he did not understand. This battlefield reality quickly spawned its own folklore and terminology. Among the German Landser, the RGD-33 earned a fitting and revealing nickname, the Russisch Rätsel, or the Russian riddle. This moniker arose directly from the practical impossibility of visually determining from a distance whether an incoming grenade had its defensive sleeve attached. This simple fact, the inability to assess the level of threat, was a unique and potent feature that instilled a deep-seated fear. It transformed the grenade from a simple weapon into a psychological tormentor. The Soviet soldiers, keenly aware of the fear their weapon inspired, learned to exploit it. In a grim piece of battlefield theater, Red Army soldiers would sometimes deliberately and openly demonstrate the act of fitting the rubashka onto their grenades just before launching an attack. This simple, silent gesture was a powerful act of demoralization, a clear signal to the watching German defenders of the heightened lethality that was about to be unleashed upon them. It was a message that needed no translation, preying on the very uncertainty that made the Russian riddle so effective. The RGD-33 did not just kill and maim, it sowed doubt, undermined morale, and shattered the foundational belief in German technical superiority that was so crucial to the Wehrmacht's fighting spirit. The RGD-33's technical and psychological impact was cemented by its extraordinary tactical flexibility, which allowed it to excel in a wide spectrum of combat situations, from desperate defense to aggressive assault. This was not a weapon with a single, predefined role, it was a versatile toolkit that gave the individual Red Army soldier unprecedented adaptability on the battlefield. The grenade's combat record, which began well before the German invasion of 1941, demonstrated its effectiveness and refined the tactics for its use. Its first major tests came during the border conflicts of the late 1930s, notably in the fierce fighting of the Battle of Lake Khasan against the Japanese in 1938 and during the grueling Soviet-Finnish War of 1939 to 1940. These early deployments served as a violent proving ground, hardening the weapon and the soldiers who wielded it, ensuring that by 1941, the RGD-33 was a mature and understood system within the Red Army. One of the most potent applications of the RGD-33 was its use against fortified positions and, in a more desperate capacity, against armored vehicles. The design lent itself perfectly to the creation of powerful improvised demolition charges. To tackle enemy bunkers, machine gun nests, or even tanks, Soviet soldiers would create svyazki, or bundles, of several grenades. In a crucial detail of this field modification, the handles were removed from the outer grenades, allowing them to be clustered tightly around a central, complete grenade. When the central grenade was armed and thrown, its detonation would trigger the entire bundle simultaneously, concentrating a massive explosive force onto a single point. This transformed the RGD-33 from an anti-personnel weapon into a formidable tool for breaching fortifications and disabling tank tracks or suspension, giving Soviet infantry a much-needed measure of anti-armor capability in the absence of dedicated weaponry. However, it was in the brutal, claustrophobic environments of urban warfare that the RGD-33's dual-mode nature truly demonstrated its genius. The grenade showed particular and devastating effectiveness in the close-quarters street fighting that defined the battles for the Leningrad front and, most iconically, Stalingrad. The tactical rhythm of urban combat, storming buildings, clearing rooms, and then desperately defending them, demanded a weapon that could instantly switch between offensive and defensive roles. A Soviet soldier preparing to storm a German-held room could use the RGD-33 without its fragmentation sleeve, relying on the powerful concussion to stun the occupants just before his assault. Moments later, having taken the position, the same soldier could slide the rubashka onto his next grenade, transforming it into a defensive powerhouse to repel the inevitable German counterattack, saturating the street or hallway outside with a lethal storm of shrapnel. This ability to tailor the weapon's effect to the immediate tactical need gave Soviet troops a significant advantage in the chaotic, fluid fighting of the cityscapes. The cumulative effect of this tactical prowess, from its use in bundles to its supreme effectiveness in city fighting, forged a fearsome reputation for the weapon among its adversaries. The German soldier learned through bloody experience to dread the distinctive hiss and crack of Dyakonov's grenade. The sentiment was perfectly and succinctly summarized by a Soviet officer who, when asked about the weapon's impact, offered the simple, unadorned observation, "The Germans really don't like them." This profound understatement captured the essence of the RGD-33's combat legacy, a weapon so effective, so adaptable, and so psychologically intimidating that it was defined simply by the sheer hatred it inspired in the enemy. The technological and psychological shock dealt by the RGD-33 did not go unanswered. The German military-industrial complex, though initially caught off guard, was a formidable and adaptive machine. Faced with a Soviet weapon that clearly outmatched their standard-issue steel hand grenade in fragmentation and tactical flexibility, the Wehrmacht was forced to evolve. The era of unquestioned confidence was over, replaced by a reactive and urgent search for solutions. This German adaptation unfolded across multiple fronts, from crude battlefield improvisations to new industrial designs and, ultimately, to a fundamental shift in military doctrine. The most immediate and telling evidence of German adaptation came directly from the front lines. In a clear admission of the Rubashka's effectiveness, German soldiers began experimenting with captured Soviet equipment. There are documented instances of them attempting to fit the fragmentation sleeves from captured RGD-33s onto the warheads of their own Stielhandgranate M24 potato mashers. This attempt to create a crude battlefield hybrid, marrying German reliability with Soviet lethality, was the ultimate form of flattery. While largely unsuccessful due to the mismatch in design, these experiments highlighted the profound respect and fear German troops had for the Soviet fragmentation concept and their desperate desire to replicate its effects. On the industrial front, the German response was twofold, developing an alternative grenade philosophy and attempting to improve their existing one. The first path led to the introduction of the Model 39 I hand grenade, or egg grenade. This was an attempt to create a smaller, more compact alternative to the bulky steel hand grenade, a weapon that a soldier could carry in greater quantities and throw easily from confined spaces. However, while the Model 39 offered convenience, it was a significant step down in power and was in no way an answer to the RGD-33. By comparison, it was a far weaker weapon, lacking both the explosive payload and, crucially, the devastating, purpose-built fragmentation capability of its sleeved Soviet rival. The more direct challenge for German engineers was to improve the steel hand grenade and to create analogues to the Soviet shirt. Development began on improved versions of the M24, and German industry experimented with creating their own attachable fragmentation sleeves. Yet, for reasons rooted in production priorities and differing design philosophies, they were never able to fully or successfully copy the elegant simplicity and dual-mode effectiveness of the Soviet solution on a mass scale. Their efforts were a reaction, an attempt to close a technological gap that had been unexpectedly revealed. Perhaps the most definitive proof of the RGD-33's lasting impact was its formal inclusion in German military doctrine. The Russian riddle was no longer just a frontline problem, it became an officially recognized threat that required a systemic, top-down response. By 1943, German infantry training manuals and tactical instructions contained specific and explicit warnings about the unique dangers posed by Soviet hand grenades. Soldiers were now formally educated on the variable threat, coached to recognize the different acoustic signature, and drilled on the necessity of seeking much deeper and more substantial cover than was required for their own grenades. The German adaptation was therefore not just about hardware, it was an evolution of tactics and training, a formal admission that the simple weapon conceived by Mikhail Dyakonov had permanently changed the rules of infantry combat on the Eastern Front. In 1942, at the bloody apex of the war on the Eastern Front, the Soviet High Command made a decision that, from an outsider's perspective, seemed entirely paradoxical. It initiated the process of replacing the RGD-33, the very grenade that had proven to be a technical and psychological triumph over its German counterpart. This was not a weapon being retired due to failure or obsolescence. Instead, its successor, the far simpler and cruder RG-42, was chosen to take its place. This change of generations was not an admission of the RGD-33's shortcomings as a weapon, but rather a testament to its profound success, and a pragmatic response to the insatiable demands of total warfare. The reasons for this transition were not born on the battlefield, but in the strained heart of the Soviet war economy. For all its brilliant design and tactical flexibility, the RGD-33 was a weapon of peacetime precision. Its production was a complex and exacting affair, a flaw that was manageable in 1933 but had become an unsustainable luxury by 1942. The grenade's manufacture was defined by three critical liabilities: its complexity, its high cost, and the demanding level of precision required for its fabrication. The intricate, multi-part construction, involving a separate handle, a complex detonator mechanism, a precisely formed body, and a finely machined fragmentation sleeve, required skilled labor and high-quality machine tools. In a nation that was mobilizing its entire industrial base, relocating factories east of the Urals, and employing a less trained workforce to replace the men sent to the front, such a demanding production process was an unacceptable bottleneck. The RG-42, designed by V.G. Korshin, was the embodiment of wartime expediency. It was brutally simple, a plain cylindrical can filled with explosives, wrapped with an internal, pre-scored fragmentation sheet, and fitted with a universal, easy-to-produce fuse. It was cheaper to manufacture, required no complex assembly in the field, and could be mass-produced at an incredible rate by semi-skilled workers in even the most basic of workshops. The tactical nuance of the RGD-33's dual-mode system was sacrificed for the overwhelming strategic advantage of quantity. The Soviet Union needed millions upon millions of grenades, and the RG-42 was the design that could meet that demand. Despite its replacement, the RGD-33 had left an indelible mark on the conflict, with a staggering production run of approximately 50 million units. It was the primary hand grenade of the Red Army during the most desperate and critical phase of the war, from the initial shock of Operation Barbarossa through the brutal defensive battles of Moscow and Stalingrad. Its role during this period cannot be overstated. In a broader, more strategic sense, by the time it was phased out, the RGD-33 had already accomplished its most crucial, unwritten mission. It had served as a powerful and lethal demonstration that Soviet designers were fully capable of creating weaponry that was not merely equal, but in key respects, superior to the vaunted products of German engineering. The confidence of the German Lancer and his own equipment was a tangible military asset, and the RGD-33 systematically dismantled it. The grenade's legacy, therefore, is not simply in the number of casualties it inflicted, but in the psychological and technological victory it represented. It proved that the Soviet Union was not a technologically backward state, but a formidable industrial power with a deep well of innovative talent. The transition to the simpler RG-42 was not a retreat, but a strategic pivot, made possible because the RGD-33 had already won its most important battle. It had shattered the myth of German invincibility. Decades after the last shots of the Second World War fell silent, the legacy of the RGD-33 endures, not just as a museum piece, but as a case study in military innovation. In the quiet, climate-controlled archives of the modern German Bundeswehr, one can still find the meticulous reports penned by the military engineers of the Third Reich. Filed away are their detailed analyses of the Russisch Granate mit einem Geheimnis, the Russian grenade with a secret. Even years after the conflict, long after the immediate sting of defeat had faded, German designers would privately and publicly acknowledge the truth. The idea of a simple, removable fragmentation sleeve was an act of genius, a brutally effective and elegantly simple solution that had caught their entire military-industrial complex by surprise. The RGD-33 was not just another weapon, it was a lesson, paid for in blood, that would be studied for generations. The significance of the RGD-33 in the grand history of military technology cannot be overstated. It fundamentally altered the trajectory of hand grenade development in the post-war era. Before its introduction, the concept of a dual-mode grenade was a theoretical novelty. Dyakonov's design made it a battlefield reality, proving that a single weapon could be adapted instantly from an offensive concussion tool to a defensive fragmentation powerhouse. This principle of modularity and tactical flexibility directly influenced the design of countless subsequent weapon systems around the world. The lesson for modern ordnance engineering was clear and profound. Sometimes, the most revolutionary shift in the balance of power does not come from a complex new superweapon, but from a simple, clever technical solution that empowers the individual soldier. Ultimately, the story of the RGD-33 is a deeply human one. It is the story of how one man, Mikhail Dyakonov, born into a modest burgher family in Tula, could single-handedly challenge and confound the entirety of Germany's vaunted military-industrial machine. His invention was not the product of a massive state-funded research bureau, but of a single, brilliant mind honed by frontline experience. The grenade that bore his name became far more than a piece of ordnance. it became a symbol of Soviet ingenuity and a powerful testament to the idea that victory in war is forged not only by the quantity of steel a nation can produce, but by the quality and cleverness of its technical solutions. The Russian riddle was a lesson taught by a genius from the Tula land, and its echoes can still be heard in the design of the weapons that define the modern battlefield.